The savannah sun poured through the cathedral's stained glass like molten gold, casting halos over the velvet pews and white roses arranged with precision at every aisle. The air buzzed with whispers and the delicate tinkling of pearls and cufflinks. Every socialite within 100 miles was present, their smartphones tilted discreetly to capture every curated moment. The city hadn't seen a wedding like this in years. At the altar, Graham Prescott stood tall in a tailored charcoal suit, handcrafted in Milan. His cufflinks bore his initials in platinum. His jaw was tight, his lips pressed into a line. He checked his watch again, third time in 5 minutes. 2 o'clock sharp, he murmured, barely audible. Beside him, the officiant cleared his throat with rehearsed reverence, flipping open a small black book. Behind Graham, his childhood friend and COO, Cal Bennett, leaned in. "She's just running late. It's probably the dress," Cal whispered. Graham didn't reply. His gray eyes stared ahead at the grand oak doors, still closed. The music continued. Strings swelling, the murmurs thickened. Martha Prescott, seated in the front row with a diamond-encrusted clutch on her lap, tapped one finger rhythmically against her knee, her southern grace faltering just slightly. Graham's fingers curled inward. He'd built empires, negotiated 8-figure deals over breakfast. Shut down competitors before lunch. He controlled outcomes. Managed risk. This wasn't risk. This was unraveling. 3 more minutes passed. Then the cathedral doors cracked open. Everyone turned. But it wasn't Renee. It was her sister, pale and flustered, tiptoeing down the aisle in heels too high for her trembling legs. She whispered something to Martha. Martha's lips parted, eyebrows rising in disbelief. Graham's voice cut through the tension. "Where is she?" A pause. Then the words no man wants to hear at his own wedding. "She's gone." Gasps rippled through the congregation. One woman clutched her pearls in cartoonish disbelief. Someone's phone beeped. Another camera flash went off. Graham stood still. She didn't leave a note, no message. No explanation, just vanished, along with the $200,000 designer gown, the stylists, the curated narrative they'd spun for the media. Cal gently touched his shoulder. "Do you want to?" Graham turned and walked straight down the aisle. He didn't flinch at the crowd, didn't acknowledge the reporters gathering outside. He slid into the back seat of his black town car, slammed the door, and muttered to the driver, "Take me anywhere that doesn't have my name on the building." They drove in silence, through Savannah's cobbled streets, past the manicured squares and moss-draped oaks. Graham stared out the window, his reflection a blur against centuries-old architecture. His phone buzzed and buzzed and buzzed. He ignored every call. The Rolls slowed at a corner near the riverside. A quiet boutique hotel sat at the end of the block, its wraparound porch shaded by thick magnolias. A cleaning cart rattled near the front. A woman in a tan uniform bent over a planter box, brushing soil off the bricks with a stiff broom. The driver spoke gently. "Sir, want to stop here? You could walk a minute, get air." Graham nodded. The door clicked open. He stepped out. The street was still, the kind of quiet that held stories. The scent of sweet jasmine floated in the breeze. Graham exhaled, tugging at his tie, loosening it. His shoes clicked against the brick pavement as he approached the porch. The woman swept in slow, methodical strokes. She had dark, steady eyes and a bun that looked like it had been tied in a rush. No makeup. No artifice. Just presence. Real. Undistracted. She looked up. Their eyes met. "You're in my dust trail," she said flatly. He blinked. "Excuse me? Don't mean to be rude, mister, but I just swept this side." "You're gonna stand there. Do it on the clean side." Graham didn't move. "Do you know who I am?" She shrugged. "Some man in a suit." "Savannah's got plenty." He stared, stunned. And then he laughed. Short. Dry. The sound surprised them both. She kept sweeping. "You laugh like it hurts." Graham walked to the edge of the porch, sat down on the steps. "It does." A beat passed. She paused her broom. "I'm Loretta King. Work the early shift." "You're sitting on my finishing line." "I'm Graham Prescott." She squinted. "Well, that explains the 'do you know who I am' business. I just got left at the altar." Loretta didn't say anything at first, just leaned on her broom and let the wind do the talking. "Well, I guess you needed a clean exit." Another laugh, this one deeper, Beeler. He looked at her, really looked. "You want to marry me?" She raised an eyebrow. "You lost your mind." "I'll pay you $30 million. Silence. A crow cawed somewhere in the distance. 30 million, she repeated, legally binding. "No intimacy required. Appear at functions. Say the right things." "I'll respect your space. You live well. I get the image stability I need." 6 months, and we walk away clean. Loretta crossed her arms, her broom now forgotten. "You can't buy a woman's pride." "I'm not trying to. I'm asking for a contract." "You're asking for a mask." He didn't deny it. She looked him over, eyes sharp and slow. Then, without another word, she reached behind her cart, pulled out a thermos, and poured sweet tea into the cap, like it was a sacred ritual. "You get one answer," she said, sipping slowly. "And it won't be now." Graham nodded. She looked out over the street. "You got the kind of face people follow, but don't love." He didn't speak. "Didn't need to." "I ain't cheap, and I ain't stupid," she added. "I'd be a fool to think you are," she smirked. "Then you might just be worth talking to." She stepped down from the porch, her broom dragging behind her, tea in hand. "Come back tomorrow. If you're serious, bring something stronger than a number." He watched her go, this woman with calloused hands and diamond-hard presence, moving like she owned the whole block. His phone buzzed again. He didn't answer it. Instead, he stood up, looking down at the spot where she'd been. And for the first time that day, he didn't feel like the man who had been left behind. He felt like a man walking into a story that might be bigger than himself. If you enjoyed this video, comment 1 to let me know. If not, comment 2. Your thought mattered to me either way. The next morning, the air in Savannah was thick with spring heat and something else Graham couldn't quite name. He sat in the back of his private car, parked discreetly across from the same boutique hotel, staring at the entrance like it might breathe or speak. His fingers tapped rhythmically against the leather seat, the same way his mother's had on her knee yesterday, right before everything fell apart. He hadn't slept. Not really. His mind had paced all night. Renee's silence, the chaos of the press. The headlines: "Billionaire abandoned at the altar." The mounting emails from the board, all hinting, some more bluntly than others, that the IPO could be in jeopardy, that investors wanted image stability, that being left at the altar didn't just make him look broken, it made him look weak. But Graham Prescott didn't break. He rebuilt. He glanced at the hotel's side entrance again. Still no sign of her. He pulled out his phone. Time, 8:14 a.m. His driver, Marcus, cleared his throat from the front seat. "You sure you don't want me to call ahead, sir?" "No." "You sure she's going to show?" "She told me to come back," Graham said flatly. "So I came back." He looked out again. And there she was, Loretta emerged from the side entrance, holding a clipboard in one hand, her uniform still the same neutral tone, her sneakers dusted with garden soil. Her hair was tied back in a patterned scarf today, a little tighter than yesterday. Her gaze was focused on the walkway, not the man watching her from across the street. Graham stepped out of the car. She saw him but didn't wave. "Morning," he called, crossing slowly. She looked at her watch. 8:15 on the dot. "Either you're a man of your word or a man of desperation." "Both," he said without hesitation. That gave her pause, just for a second. She walked over to the edge of the sidewalk, crossing her arms. "All right, Mr. Prescott. Let's hear it again, real slow this time, like you're not making the craziest offer in Georgia this week." Graham took a breath. The breeze lifted the edge of his blazer. "I need someone the public believes in," he said. "Someone grounded. Strong. Not just for photos, but for presence. The company needs a wife. I don't need love. I need trust. And I trust you'll say exactly what you mean." Loretta tilted her head. "That's it? You want to hire a wife because you trust me to be honest? I want someone who doesn't flinch, who doesn't care about pretending." You walked straight past everything that makes other people blink. Or maybe I just don't got time for nonsense. He smiled. Just a flicker. 6 months. $30 million, he continued. Half up front, half when the agreement ends. Appear at public events. Live at my estate. No intimacy. No obligations outside the contract terms. You keep your own life, I keep mine. But in public, we're married. Legally, we will be. And when people start asking why Graham Prescott married a cleaning lady from Liberty Street, I'll say I finally did something real." Loretta looked at him, long and hard. Her face was unreadable, but her eyes, they moved fast, calculating. Not dazzled, not flattered, just measuring. "What happens if I say yes?" she asked softly. "You'll have a new name, new address, new headlines, but you'll have your freedom. That's non-negotiable." She looked down at the sidewalk. A leaf tumbled across the curb, caught in a draft. "You think money solves everything?" "No," he said, "but it can fix what broke yesterday." Loretta laughed, a short huff that carried a note of surprise. "You think you're the one who got broke? You got left, sure. But I've seen worse at the laundromat at midnight." Broken isn't a man who gets embarrassed. Broken is when you stop believing in yourself. Do you believe in me? I don't even know you. Then get to know me. She raised an eyebrow. Like a date? Like a partnership? Paper only. Marriage without the mess. Exactly. Loretta rocked back on her heels, looked past him to the car still idling at the curb. "That your driver? Marcus?" "Loyal as they come. He gonna be taking me to your mansion, or we gonna walk there together and give the papers a headline worth printing? You'll ride. First class." She smirked, folding her arms. "You know I got a daughter." "I know. She don't trust suits." "She shouldn't. But I'll earn it." Loretta studied him a beat longer, then held out her hand. "You bring me a contract this evening. Simple. No fine print tricks. We'll read it over at my kitchen table with a mug of tea and a legal pad. If I like it, I'll sign." He looked down at her hand. Calloused, strong, real. He took it. They shook once. Firm. No smiles. Just acknowledgement. Then Loretta pulled her hand back and turned on her heel. "Don't be late," she said over her shoulder. "I don't reheat tea." Graham stood there, still watching, as she disappeared around the corner. He let out a breath he didn't realize he was holding. Back in the car, Marcus glanced at him in the rearview mirror. Well? She said yes to the next step. Marcus raised an eyebrow. Boss, you sure about this? Graham stared out the window. No, he said quietly. But for the first time in a long time, I'm curious. As the car pulled away from the curb, the sun caught on the brass plaque outside the hotel entrance, King Company Hospitality Services. Small, understated, but now unmistakably important. And the woman who swept the steps had just agreed to marry Savannah's most untouchable man. Not for love, not for fairy tales, but for $30 million, and something neither of them could quite name yet. Curiosity, challenge, possibility. A contract was coming, but something else was already underway. Loretta stood at the edge of her worn laminate counter, slowly stirring honey into her tea. The late afternoon light filtered through the lace curtains, making patterns on the kitchen floor. Hattie sat across from her, arms folded, one eyebrow raised like she was watching a scene in a movie she didn't believe. Let me get this straight, Hattie said. You're thinking about marrying a billionaire. For money. Like actually signing papers. Loretta didn't flinch. It's a contract, baby. 6 months. 30 million. No games, no touching, no pretending at home. Hattie blinked. You really expect me to believe that? I expect you to believe I know what I'm doing. You just met this man. I met his mind. And I've met 100 just like him in suits and ties, trying to boss folks with their wallets. But this one, he's different. Hattie stood up, restless. Different how? Like lost rich or controlling rich? He's calculated. Smart, but tired, Loretta said, sipping. He's worn out from performing for people who'd sell their own blood to get in the headlines. And what about you? Hattie asked. What are you performing for, Mama? Loretta's gaze held, soft but steady. I'm performing for a future. The front door knocked. 2 firm taps, no hesitation. Loretta glanced at the clock. Right on time. Hattie didn't move. Loretta walked to the door and opened it to Graham, standing crisp in a slate-gray suit, holding a thick manila envelope in one hand and a wrapped bouquet in the other. These aren't roses, he said quickly, offering the flowers. They better not be, Loretta replied, taking them. I told you I don't like clichés. Ranunculus and chamomile, he added. Said to symbolize respect and clarity. Nice research, she said, not smiling, but not frowning either. He stepped into the house, not too confident, not too hesitant. His eyes scanned the room, clean but lived in. A Bible on the end table. A basket of laundry folded, ready to be put away. A chipped mug holding fresh pens. Real life, lined with dignity. This is Hattie, Loretta said, motioning toward her daughter. Graham extended his hand. It's good to meet you. Hattie looked at him like she was reading a chart of stock values, then shook his hand briefly, coolly. We'll see. Loretta gestured to the table. Let's sit. They did. She opened the manila envelope and laid out the papers. Black and white clauses, numbered sections, clearly formatted. Loretta didn't skim. She read. Every line. Lips moving softly as she followed the paragraphs. Graham sat still, letting her take her time. At one point, she looked up. Clause 17, no cohabitation requirement in shared bedroom. That was your doing? Yes. I don't think respect comes from forced proximity. She nodded. And clause 22, monthly deposit into a separate account under my name. Correct. In case anything goes sideways, you're protected. And clause 28, 1 hour per day reserved for personal conversation. What's that about? Graham looked mildly embarrassed for the first time. PR. My team thinks it's best we appear emotionally connected. Loretta raised an eyebrow. So you want us to schedule fake heart-to-hearts? We can sit on opposite ends of the house and talk about weather if you want, but the clause has to stay. She leaned back. You really dotted every I on this. I'm not a man who leaves things to chance, Hattie cut in. And what happens if she says no tomorrow morning? Then I wish her well. Quietly. Silence settled. The tea steamed in both mugs. Outside, the wind picked up just enough to rustle the crepe myrtle branches along the porch. Finally, Loretta closed the folder. All right, Graham straightened. All right? I'll sign. Hattie exhaled audibly. Graham nodded, expression unreadable. But under one condition, Loretta added. He waited. You don't just take me to your mansion like I'm luggage. We walk in together, at the front door, not through the side. Not behind you. Together. Graham's lips curved slightly. Deal. Loretta extended her hand. We're married in name, not in power. That's the only way I'll ever be anyone's wife. He took her hand again. No longer as strangers. When he left, the sun had begun to dip. The house was quiet. Hattie sat across from her, a bit less guarded now. You really gonna do it? She asked. Loretta nodded. And I'm not apologizing for it. But why him, Mama? Why this? Loretta looked out the window, the light catching her eyes like something distant and burning. Because I've spent too long surviving other people's rules, she said. And I've got a chance now to make my own. This isn't about money. It's about changing what comes next. For you, for me. And him? Loretta smirked. He don't know it yet. But I might be changing his next, too. That night, she sat on the porch swing, the contract in her lap, and a fresh cup of sweet tea in her hand. The stars over Savannah blinked down, as if they knew something was beginning. Something strange. Something bold, not love, not yet. But something worth the risk. If you enjoyed this video, comment 1 to let me know. If not, comment 2. Your thought mattered to me either way. The gates of Prescott Manor creaked open at precisely 8:00 a.m., revealing a long, curved driveway lined with manicured hedges and azalea bushes blooming in proud shades of crimson. Loretta sat tall in the back of the town car, wearing her Sunday best, not because someone told her to, but because she chose to walk in with dignity. A navy dress, knee-length and crisp, with a soft white sweater draped over her shoulders. Her hair was wrapped in a simple scarf, tied low. No glamour, no frills, just her. Graham sat beside her, silent, gaze fixed forward. His suit was charcoal again, but this time he'd left the tie undone. A gesture, a message. But Loretta didn't bite. You nervous? He asked finally. Not about the house, she replied, adjusting her cuffs. Maybe about the people inside it. Graham gave a small nod. My mother will be waiting. I figured, Loretta said, and I didn't come to beg for space in her world. I wouldn't have brought you here if you needed to. The car rolled to a gentle stop in front of the towering white-columned mansion. Its wraparound porch gleamed in the morning sun. A butler opened the front door before they could even step out. Graham offered Loretta his arm. She didn't hesitate. She took it. Inside, the air was cool and quiet, like the kind of silence meant to intimidate. The foyer opened to a grand staircase and a chandelier that glittered like a threat. Every surface sparkled. Too perfect. Too untouched. Then came the voice. Well. So it's true. Martha Prescott stood at the base of the staircase, her pearls gleaming against a perfectly pressed ivory blouse. Her lipstick was precise. Her posture, sharper than the edge of the marble railing. Loretta let go of Graham's arm and stepped forward. "Good morning," she said calmly. Martha didn't return the greeting. Her eyes skimmed Loretta from head to toe, not with curiosity, with calculation. Graham moved to stand between them. "Mother, this is Loretta King, my wife." Martha's eyes snapped to her son. "Your contract," she said, dryly. Loretta smiled. "Either way, I'm here." Martha folded her arms. "And how long do you plan to stay?" 6 months, Loretta said, her voice steady. "Long enough for the walls to learn my name." That landed. Martha's lips parted slightly before she turned on her heel. "Breakfast is in the garden, if you're interested." She walked off. Graham looked at Loretta. "She's set in her ways." "She's used to control," Loretta replied. "So are you." He studied her face. "You all right?" "I've walked into tougher rooms with less money and more judgment." "Let's eat." The garden was pristine. White iron furniture, fountains murmuring in the distance, and hedges trimmed like they answered to royalty. A long table stretched across the stone patio, set with linen napkins and silverware that gleamed beneath the morning sun. 3 seats were occupied. Cal Bennett, looking sharp in a sand-colored blazer, offered a warm smile. "Loretta," he said, standing as they approached. "Pleasure to finally meet you." "Graham's been full of mystery about you." "Probably because I don't fit the resume," she said, shaking his hand. "You fit something more interesting," Cal replied. Beside him sat a woman with honey-blonde hair pulled into a polished bun. She wore sunglasses despite the shade. Her lips pursed as if she'd just sucked a lemon. Renee Dalton. Loretta didn't blink. She took her seat at the table like she'd been doing it all her life. Renee removed her glasses. "I must admit, I didn't believe it when I heard." "That makes 2 of us," Loretta said, unfolding her napkin. Renee's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Well, I suppose we all do strange things when we're heartbroken." "I wouldn't know," Loretta said. "I've been too busy building to get broken." Martha cleared her throat, lifting her teacup. "Perhaps we could keep this civil." Graham stayed quiet, watching the table like a man unsure whether to join the conversation or referee it. Cal poured more coffee and tried to steer the mood. "So, Loretta, tell us something about yourself." "I run cleaning operations for 3 boutique hotels," she said. "Single mother, church treasurer. Bake a mean sweet potato pie." "That's impressive," Cal said. Martha sipped her tea. "And you're sure 6 months of this circus will be worth the payout?" "I'm sure 6 months of seeing your world won't change mine," Loretta said. "But it might change his." Her eyes cut to Graham, soft but certain. Renee leaned back. "You're either very brave or very naive." Loretta leaned in. "And you're either still in love or deeply bored." That silence, heavy, honest. Nobody breathed. Graham finally set down his fork. Enough. Loretta didn't look away. She didn't need to. Later, back inside the house, Graham followed Loretta to the guest wing. She walked the hall slowly, her heels quiet against the hardwood floors, eyes taking in the framed art, the curated furniture, the scent of cedar and something faintly expensive. At the door to her room, he spoke. "You didn't flinch back there. I told you I wasn't here to play dress-up. You disarmed every person at that table." "They brought their weapons," she said, unlocking the door. "I brought my truth." He watched her pause at the threshold. "You sure this isn't too much?" he asked. Loretta turned to face him, hand on the doorknob. "I was raised by a woman who cleaned houses 3 times this size and still left a thank you note on the pillow. This house doesn't scare me. What scares me is how little anyone in it knows about real life. She opened the door, stepped inside, then looked back. But you might, she said softly. And that's why I'm still here. The door closed with a quiet click. Graham stood in the hallway, alone, feeling like someone had just rearranged the furniture in his soul. And for the first time since this entire arrangement began, he didn't feel in control. He felt something deeper, curiosity again, and maybe the very edge of awe. The morning after the breakfast showdown, the air in Prescott Manor was still. Too still. Loretta stood barefoot on the balcony outside her guest suite, watching the fog lift slowly off the magnolia trees in the yard. A steaming mug of sweet tea warmed her hands, but her mind wasn't settled. Not after yesterday. She had faced down Renee and Martha like she was built for it. But the silence afterward, that was something else. That was the kind of silence that seeped through cracks and settled deep. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. A message from Hattie. How's the palace? You wearing a tiara yet? Loretta smirked. She typed back. No tiara. Just folks pretending silverware makes them better. She slipped the phone into her robe pocket and walked into the room, the polished floors cool under her feet. Just as she reached for her blouse to start dressing, there was a knock. Loretta? Graham's voice, cautious. You decent? She blinked. The man hadn't knocked once since she moved in. I am. What's going on? He stepped in a few inches, stopping near the threshold. His sleeves were rolled, collar open, the tailored version of casual. I'd like you to meet with my executive team, he said. She raised an eyebrow. You bringing your contract wife to boardrooms now? It's more than that, he said. They're asking questions. I need you to be seen, heard. Loretta crossed her arms. And you want me to play the part? I want you to be exactly who you are. Her lips parted just slightly. She hadn't expected that answer. What's the setting? She asked. Prescott Gold office. Top floor, lunch meeting. I'll have a car ready in an hour. She gave him a slow nod. Then I'll be ready. An hour later, the car rolled through downtown Savannah, sleek and silent. Loretta wore a soft emerald green blouse, gold studs in her ears, and tailored slacks that fit like respect. She kept her hair wrapped low, her lipstick a simple mauve. She didn't look like she was trying to impress anyone. She looked like herself, elevated. As they stepped into the glass doors of the towering Prescott Gold building, people turned. Some out of curiosity, some out of disbelief. But Loretta kept walking, eyes forward, shoulders square. Graham escorted her to the elevator, then pressed the top floor button. Just remember, he said quietly, you're not here because I need to prove anything. You're here because I trust you in rooms where people whisper too much. The elevator doors opened. The conference room was all glass and shine, with a panoramic view of the city. Seated at the table were 6 men and 1 woman, all dressed like decisions and deadlines. They stood as Graham entered. Everyone, he said, this is Loretta King, my wife. No one said anything at first. Then one man, sharply dressed with a toothy smile, broke the silence. Pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Prescott. I'm Neil Sampson, head of investor relations. Mr. Sampson, Loretta said, shaking his hand. You can call me Loretta. I don't believe in titles that ain't earned yet. A chuckle slipped from one of the other team members. A woman at the end of the table, arms folded, studied Loretta with open intrigue. She's direct, the woman said, and honest, Graham added. Good, said the woman, because the board's been anything but. The tension in the room shifted. Loretta could feel it. They discussed optics, market shifts, media narratives. And every now and then, eyes drifted to Loretta, as if waiting for her to fumble or freeze. She didn't. At one point someone said, "And your background was in hospitality?" Loretta sipped her water, then set it down carefully. Started in motel housekeeping at 17, cleaned rooms, trained staff, managed teams. Folks think scrubbing a floor don't teach you leadership, but managing people when the AC breaks and a guest is screaming over a pillowcase. That's crisis management. Another pause. Graham smiled, but didn't interrupt. He didn't need to. Loretta continued, "Y'all worried about my image dragging down your numbers? Let me ask you this. How many of your clients have ever trusted someone who didn't wear a tie?" No one responded. "Exactly," she said, leaning back. "You got diversity in your branding, but not in your boardroom. So maybe I'm not the risk you think I am. Maybe I'm the truth you needed." Silence followed. Then the woman at the end clapped once. Then again. "Well said," she murmured. The meeting continued. The energy shifted. By the end of the hour, no one was whispering about Graham's marriage anymore. They were wondering what Loretta was going to say next. Back in the elevator, Graham pressed the button with a quiet pride. "You handled that like you've been at the table your whole life." Loretta looked straight ahead. "I've been at a table my whole life," she said. "Just not the ones you see in buildings like this." They stepped outside into the late afternoon sun. Loretta paused before getting into the car. "Tell me something," she said. Graham looked at her, waiting. "Why me?" He hesitated. "Because you don't need me." She studied his face, the honesty behind the words. "Not a lot of men say that like it's a good thing." "I'm not most men." "No," she said, finally getting into the car. "You're not." As they drove back toward Prescott Manor, the city blurred past them, but Loretta's thoughts stayed sharp. She was in his world now, but she hadn't left hers behind. And every room she walked into, she was leaving the door open behind her, for air, for truth, for change. Rain came down soft and steady over Savannah, veiling the city in a silvery hush. The drops traced down the tall windows of Prescott Manor like fingers, blurring the garden beyond. Loretta stood in the sitting room, one hand wrapped around a mug of tea, the other holding her phone. She'd just gotten off the line with Hattie, who was spending the weekend at Eloise's. It should have brought comfort, but instead, she felt exposed. The house was too quiet, the kind of quiet that didn't comfort, but watched. She turned as footsteps echoed down the grand hallway. Graham entered, jacket off, shirt sleeves rolled, his hair damp from the short sprint from the garage. He looked more undone than usual, hands in his pockets, something unsettled flickering behind his eyes. "Everything all right?" she asked, not moving. "I've had smoother board calls," he muttered, walking toward the bar cart, but not pouring anything. Loretta sipped her tea. "You brought me in that room yesterday to help shift the conversation. Seemed like it worked." "It did. You were brilliant." He paused. "But it also made a few people nervous." She raised an eyebrow. "Good. They ought to be." He looked at her then. "Fully. You scare people, Loretta. You say that like it's a flaw. It's not. But it's disruptive." Her smile was faint. "That's the difference between the truth and a speech. One's designed to fit, the other's designed to stick." Graham walked to the window, watching the rain. "My mother's invited guests for a dinner party tomorrow night," he said without turning. "Old family friends. Investors. Press, maybe." Loretta let the silence hang. "And I assume you need your contract wife to be dressed up and quiet," she said. "I need you to be present," he replied. "But yes, a bit of polish would help." She looked down into her tea, then set it on the marble end table with a soft clink. "You knew what you were getting when you offered me that contract." "I did. So, why are you asking me to be someone else now?" "I'm not," he said quickly. Then softer, "I'm asking you to make room for the performance, without losing yourself." She turned to him, eyes sharp. "You think I haven't been performing my whole life? Smiling for customers who bark, swallowing pride to keep a paycheck, cleaning houses where folks pretend they can't hear you cry in the next room?" He went quiet. "You put me in this house, Graham, but you don't get to edit me to make it easier." He stepped forward, voice low. "It's not about easy. It's about survival." That hit differently. Loretta held his gaze. "Maybe you and I are surviving different storms." He didn't respond. He didn't have to. The room filled with something unspoken. The sound of rain became louder somehow. Then, from behind them, a voice sliced in, measured and honeyed. "Well, this is cozy." Martha stood in the archway, holding a crystal glass of lemon water. Her eyes landed on Loretta's bare feet, then moved to Graham's undone shirt collar. "I hope I'm not interrupting strategy." "Mama," Graham said, a warning under his breath. Loretta didn't flinch. "We were discussing tomorrow's guest list." "Oh yes, the dinner," Martha replied, stepping inside. "I do hope you'll consider wearing something complimentary to the Prescott legacy, dear." "I'll wear what fits," Loretta said calmly. "And what I can move in." "Of course," Martha smiled, though it didn't reach her eyes. "Just remember, legacy is about perception." Loretta tilted her head. "No. Legacy is about what outlives you, not what people whisper about during dessert." Martha's smile froze just for a second. "Excuse me," she said, walking out with perfect posture, her glass barely swaying. Graham exhaled. "You really don't pull punches. I speak in full sentences, that's all." He looked at her for a long time. "What are you afraid of?" she asked suddenly. The question lingered in the air between them. "I'm not sure," he said. "Maybe that this arrangement won't stay an arrangement." Loretta took a step closer. "Then be honest," she said. "Because I didn't come here to shrink." She turned and walked past him, back toward her wing. As she reached the hall, she paused. "By the way," she called without turning, "that green tie you wore in the elevator. It brings out the real in you." Graham blinked, caught off guard. "You notice that?" "I notice a lot more than I say." And then she was gone. He stood there, rain still falling behind him, wondering when exactly she had stopped being part of the plan and started being the part he couldn't figure out. The front foyer of Prescott Manor buzzed with soft chatter and the muted clinking of glass. Candlelight flickered off the crystal sconces. Waitstaff floated through the hall like ghosts in black and white, balancing silver trays of shrimp cocktail and tiny cheese puffs that looked like they cost more than Loretta's first car. She stood at the top of the staircase, still, watching. Her dress was burgundy silk, floor length, hugging without clinging. She'd chosen it herself. Simple, clean, elegant. She'd wrapped her hair up high and added gold hoops, not too big, just bold enough to say, "Don't mistake me for a shadow." Down below, guests began to glance upward. Heads tilted. Whispers started like wind through dry leaves. And there was Graham, near the fireplace, talking to a city councilman, but looking up the moment he felt her presence. His breath caught, but only slightly. Then he moved toward the stairs. She descended slowly, one hand grazing the polished banister. Not for balance, for control. When she reached the final step, he extended his hand. "You look unforgettable." She gave him a small smile. "Good. That's the plan." He leaned in, just enough. "Ready to meet Savannah's favorite gossip columns?" "I've stared down tighter rooms for less reward," she said. They stepped into the gathering together, heads high. Martha saw them from across the room and immediately intercepted. Her champagne flute sparkled like her smile, bright, practiced, cold. "Darling," she said to Graham, eyes barely flicking to Loretta. "Senator Hollingsworth is asking for you." "Something about the education grant." Graham nodded. "Of course. Will you be all right for a moment?" Loretta turned to Martha. "Oh, we'll be just fine." He gave them both a quick glance, half curious, half cautious, before disappearing into the next room. Martha took a sip. "You clean up well." "So do you," Loretta replied. "But I get the feeling we're not talking about gowns." Martha didn't answer. She just turned and started walking. Loretta followed, heels echoing lightly on the stone. They stepped out onto the side veranda, where the night air held the scent of gardenia and wet brick. The garden twinkled with fairy lights strung between wrought iron arches. Martha stopped by the railing. "You've changed the rhythm of this house." "I wasn't trying to," Loretta said. "No, but you've done it anyway." A long silence stretched between them. Martha's voice lowered. "I built this home for control, every flower, every frame. I curated silence. I didn't expect disruption." Loretta turned to her. "You mean honesty. I mean unpredictability. That's life," Loretta said softly. "The sooner you make peace with the mess, the better you sleep at night." Martha looked at her for the first time with something resembling curiosity. Then she nodded once. "You're not what I wanted. But I see why my son chose you." Loretta didn't blink. "He didn't choose me. He hired me." Martha's lips twitched. "Not anymore, he didn't. That man looks at you like you're a puzzle he wants to protect." Loretta didn't respond. She didn't need to. A moment later, Graham reappeared, now with a laugh in his voice and something lighter in his eyes. "I've lost the senator to bourbon and small talk," he said. "You're glowing," Loretta said, tilting her head. "And you're watching me again." "Maybe." They returned to the ballroom just as the music changed. A gentle waltz, the kind that begged for soft steps and hidden feelings. Graham offered his hand. "You trying to distract from the press in the corner?" "I'm trying to dance with my wife," he said. Loretta arched a brow, then placed her hand in his. He guided her to the center of the room. Eyes watched. Cameras clicked. But none of it mattered when his hand found the small of her back and hers rested lightly on his shoulder. "You're good at this," she murmured. "I studied," he said. "You?" "I watched and improvised." Their steps moved in sync, slow and smooth. Then he asked the question he hadn't dared before. "Do you regret saying yes?" Loretta looked up at him. "No. But I'm starting to ask myself if you're regretting bringing me here." His jaw tightened just slightly. "Why would you think that?" "Because you're careful," she said. "But every now and then I see it. That flicker. Like I'm an equation you didn't solve the first time." He looked down, eyes meeting hers. "I don't regret you, Loretta. I just don't understand how you're changing everything, without even trying." Their bodies stilled, the music fading out. "And that scares you?" she asked. He didn't answer. But the silence said enough. They stood there a moment longer, hands still joined, as the room returned to its rhythm around them. And deep inside both of them, something shifted. Not loudly, but irrevocably. The following morning unfolded with a kind of hush Loretta hadn't yet heard inside Prescott Manor. No footsteps down the marble halls. No clipped orders from the housekeeper. Even Martha's presence, usually felt like an antique perfume clinging to the curtains, was nowhere to be sensed. It was just quiet. Loretta moved through the sunroom barefoot, her robe knotted tight at the waist, tea in hand. Outside, the hydrangeas drooped heavy with dew. The garden looked almost dreamy in the golden hour haze, but she was wide awake. She turned the corner toward the kitchen and stopped. Graham was there. Not just passing through, not in business mode. He was standing at the counter, sleeves rolled, tie missing, flipping pancakes on a cast-iron griddle like he'd done it 1,000 times. "Morning," he said, without looking up. Loretta leaned on the doorframe. "Should I be calling security, or are you just bored with catered eggs?" He smiled. "I needed normal. Burnt batter at sunrise is your idea of normal." He pointed the spatula at her. "These are perfectly golden." She crossed the kitchen slowly, eyeing the plates stacked neatly beside the stove. Whose idea was this? Hattie's. That name. It froze her for half a second. "She texted late last night," Graham continued. "Said I hadn't properly fed you yet. Suggested pancakes. I took it as a challenge." Loretta reached for a piece of toast, chewed slowly, eyes never leaving him. "She's bold. She's her mother's daughter." A pause. Then she said, "She didn't mean the pancakes." He turned off the burner, finally meeting her gaze. "I know." The weight of that acknowledgement hung between them, not heavy, but charged. Like thunder before a storm you're not sure you want to run from. He set a plate in front of her at the island, sat beside her. Poured syrup with care. She took a bite, then glanced at him. "Not bad." "I aim for decent." She looked down at her fork, then back up. "Why are you really doing this?" "You mean breakfast?" "I mean this." She motioned around the room. The whole domestic script, the softness. Graham leaned back slightly, his hand running through his hair. "I don't know," he admitted. "Maybe I got tired of performing." "Then why did you build your whole life to be a stage?" He let out a quiet breath. Control. "And now?" "Now I'm realizing there's peace in not knowing how the scene ends." Loretta's eyes narrowed just slightly. "And what if you're not the one directing it?" He smiled, not smug, more like surrender. "Then maybe it'll finally be honest." They sat in silence a moment, both chewing on thoughts deeper than the pancakes. Then her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen. Eloise. She opened the message, scanned, her brow furrowed. "What is it?" Graham asked. "My friend's cousin's opening up a strip of old storefronts for lease downtown. One of them's a tiny old bakery, barely enough space for 10 tables. But it's got a wraparound window, southern-facing light, a porch." He waited. "She thought of me," Loretta said quietly. "Said it had my name on it." Graham set down his fork. "Are you thinking of taking it?" "I'm thinking of building something." The way she said it, soft but laced with steel, it lit something behind his eyes. "What would you do with it?" he asked. "A cafe?" "Not fancy, not for tourists. Just a spot with sweet tea, soft biscuits, maybe a chalkboard menu, and a corner for poetry night." "I'd come," he said. "You'd be the only one in a tie," she teased. "I'd leave it in the car." She studied him, her head tilting slightly. "You'd actually help me do this?" "I'd invest," he said. She narrowed her eyes. There's a difference. I'd back you, no strings. You always have strings, Graham. Not this time. Another pause. Then she stood, lifting her plate and setting it in the sink. If I do this cafe, it's mine, not a charity project. Not another Prescott property. Agreed. I don't want to owe you. You already don't. He stood now too, and the closeness between them in the kitchen felt uncomfortably intimate. Or maybe just honest. You're not what I expected, he said quietly. Neither are you. He reached for the mug she'd abandoned earlier, held it between his hands for a moment before offering it to her. You should take the space, he said. Let people meet the version of you I get when the cameras aren't watching. She took the mug, sipped, then met his eyes over the rim. You keep talking like this, and I might start thinking you're human. He chuckled. Scary thought. Loretta moved toward the hallway, but before she turned the corner, she said over her shoulder, If I take that space, you're helping paint the porch. No staff, no crew, just you and a brush. You got it. And Graham? Yeah? She looked back, just once. Bring that green tie. Cafe needs a little color. And then she was gone, leaving him standing in a kitchen that, for the first time, felt lived in, real, and quietly, almost foolishly, hopeful. The first time Loretta walked into the old bakery space, she didn't say a word. She didn't need to. Her silence said more than awe. It said belonging. Dust danced in the morning light like slow-falling ash. The walls, once pale mint, were peeling at the corners. A cracked tile in the front window bore the faded ghost of someone else's dream. Hattie Mae's Pies, the lettering barely legible. Graham stood behind her, hands in his pockets. It's charming. It's bones, she said, still staring at the window. But they're good ones. The space was small, 15 feet wide, maybe 40 deep. A counter on the right, a rusted oven in the back that would need replacing, the front windows arched in perfect symmetry, their wooden frames begging for paint and care. I could see poetry nights, she murmured, Sunday biscuit brunch, a corner table just for chess and checkers. You see all that already? Graham asked. I've been seeing it since I was 28. She turned to him now. I used to mop hotel lobbies thinking, if I ever had a space, I'd keep the coffee hot and the chairs soft. Make it a place where people breathe easier, where you don't have to dress up to matter. He nodded, slowly. And now? Now I've got 30 million reasons to stop dreaming and start doing. Graham stepped forward. Then let's do it. She looked at him, really looked. You understand this isn't part of the deal, right? I know. No PR angles, no interviews. Just paint and time. She tilted her head. And maybe a cash register that works. I can manage that. They stood in the middle of the room, both of them quiet. The kind of quiet that builds, not breaks. Later that afternoon, Graham returned with blueprints, a contractor, and a sense of purpose Loretta hadn't seen in him before. Not during press interviews. Not even in boardrooms. This isn't about ownership, he told the contractor. It's about restoration. Keep the charm. Update the safety. She runs the show. The man nodded, clearly unsure how to handle a billionaire who deferred to a woman in jeans and work boots. Loretta didn't miss the glance. She simply said, I'll send you the paint swatches tonight. But the porch. That gets done last, and I'm the one picking the swing. By week's end, the space was cleared, cleaned, and mapped. Loretta spent her mornings there with a tape measure, her afternoons at City Hall pushing permits, and her evenings in her guest room at the manor. Still temporary, but no longer strange. One night she came home late, dust in her curls, hands covered in paint chips and ink. She found Graham in the library, sleeves rolled, laptop open, but eyes far away. "You look like someone reading the ending of a book they didn't want to finish," she said. He looked up, startled, then smiled. "Just thinking." "Dangerous," she teased, setting her purse down on the armchair. "You ever think about what comes after this?" he asked. "After what?" "The contract, the 6 months." She didn't answer right away. Walked to the sideboard and poured herself a glass of water. "I think about what doesn't go back," she said. "What can't be undone." Graham's gaze stayed on her. "And what's that?" "You," she said. "This house, that porch swing I've claimed in my mind. And how I've started leaving my shoes by the door." He set his laptop aside. "You're starting to feel at home," he said. "That scares me more than the first day did." A pause. "Does it scare you?" she asked. "Yes," he said honestly. "Because I was never supposed to need this." This? You. That word. It sat heavy and sacred between them. Loretta's fingers tightened on her glass. "This wasn't real, Graham. That was the deal." "I know," he said. But feelings didn't read the contract. She turned slowly, her expression unreadable. "I'm building something out there that's mine. Every brick. Every table. That place. It doesn't lie." "I'm not lying." "I know," she whispered. "But I don't want to be the soft chapter in someone else's story." "You're not," he said, standing now. "You're the turning point." She stared at him, something fierce and frightened rising in her chest. Then, quietly, she said, "Don't say things you can't carry past the end date." "I don't want an end date." Loretta's breath caught. The room felt smaller. The walls closer. She moved toward the door. "I need to wash the paint off," she said. He didn't follow. He just watched. And when she disappeared down the hall, barefoot and silent, Graham stood alone in the glow of the library lamp, feeling the truth settle around him like evening dust. He hadn't just hired a woman to fix his image. He'd found someone who was quietly, irrevocably fixing him. The night air had softened to velvet by the time Loretta stepped out onto the back porch of Prescott Manor. The cafe's architectural plans had been finalized earlier that afternoon, and her head was still spinning with wood finishes and flooring estimates. But out here, in the hush between tree frogs and wind, everything slowed down. She carried a worn quilt over her arm and a glass of sweet tea in her hand. Instead of her usual robe, she wore an oversized t-shirt and cotton leggings, hair pulled back in a loose twist. No makeup, no posture. Just her. The porch swing creaked gently under her as she settled into it, tucking one foot beneath the other. The air smelled like lavender and wet brick, with a trace of lemon oil. Someone had cleaned the wood that afternoon. The stars were low and generous tonight. Savannah's sky always felt closer when the world got quiet. The screen door creaked open behind her. She didn't need to look. "You always move this quietly?" she asked. Graham's voice was low. "Only when the world feels like it might break if I breathe too loud," she smiled faintly. "Then take a seat. Porch swings made for soft landings." He joined her, but kept a respectful distance, just enough room for silence to stretch between them, unthreatening. Neither of them spoke for a long time. Loretta sipped her tea. Graham watched the moonlight play across the edge of the trees. Finally, she broke the stillness. "I was 9 when I first saw my mama cry," she said. "She was standing in front of a pink refrigerator, crying like the world had stolen her name." Graham didn't respond. He just listened. We'd been saving for months for that fridge. Something about it made her feel like she'd finally caught up, like she belonged. And when it got delivered, the door had a dent. Just a tiny one near the bottom. She stared at it like someone had punched her heart. Loretta paused. That's when I knew. Appearances weren't decoration. For some folks, their survival, their dignity. Graham shifted. And you carried that with you? She nodded. Still do. He looked at her now, not just at her, but into her, like he was seeing new corners he hadn't noticed before. I think I spent most of my life trying to outrun dents, he said. Loretta's eyes slid to him. I thought if I earned enough, owned enough, polished enough, no one would see the places where I bent. She let that sink in. Money don't hide the sound of a crack, she said. Just muffles it. A quiet chuckle escaped him. You always talk in poems. I talk in truth. If it sounds like poetry, that's your ears catching up to your heart. He looked down at his hands, resting on his knees. Then back up at the sky. Do you ever wonder what this would have been like? If we'd met another way? She turned slowly. You mean, if you hadn't offered me $30 million to pretend? He winced. Yeah. Loretta's gaze softened. Maybe I would have ignored you, she said. Maybe I would have thought you were another man with too much money and not enough soul. Fair. Or maybe I would have been too tired to notice. Graham tilted his head. Too tired? Back then I was working 3 jobs, raising a daughter, folding towels at midnight and praying they'd stretch past the rent. I didn't have room for curiosity. They sat with that a while. Graham reached behind him and pulled the old quilt over both their laps. Didn't ask. Just did it. She didn't stop him. I think the way we met, he said slowly, as wrong as it was, it forced us to see each other without pretense. Loretta nodded. Contracts strip off fantasy. All that's left is honesty. He looked at her again. This time his voice dropped just above a whisper. And now? She met his gaze, and something passed between them. Not a kiss. Not a confession. Just presence. A recognition. Now, she said, I think you're still learning how to sit in stillness. I am, he admitted. She smiled. Then let's practice. And so they sat. Not touching, not talking, just breathing in rhythm on an old porch swing, under a wide Georgia sky, where nothing was said, but everything was understood. The morning came dressed in silence. No birds, no distant hum of landscapers, no soft knock from the housekeeper with fresh linens. Just the sharp buzz of a notification on Loretta's phone, face down on the nightstand. She opened her eyes slowly, stretching against the cool sheets, unaware that the day ahead would split the air between her and Graham like a blade. Another buzz. She reached for the phone, thumb swiping across the screen with sleep-heavy precision. 4 new mentions. Trending hashtag porchlight scandal. Who is Loretta King, really? Prescott's bride has secrets. Her stomach clenched before her mind could form words. She opened the link. The screen flooded with pictures, some of her in her uniform years ago, snapped through cracked hotel windows. One from a food pantry line, holding a baby-faced Hattie on her hip. Blown-up quotes taken out of context. Accusations twisted from truth, implying she'd married up by manipulation, even suggesting she'd been coached or planted for a PR stunt gone too far. She sat up, breath thin, heart racing. Her fingers trembled as she clicked through to the source. A gossip blog notorious, But the leak, someone had to feed it. Someone close. And just below the article's headline, a comment, newly posted. She's not who she pretends to be. Ask her about Detroit. Anonymous. Loretta stared at the screen, eyes wide, then narrow. Detroit. Only one person alive would still dare throw that word like a stone. She stood, threw on a sweater, and walked straight into the hall. The house was awake now in its quiet way, polished, unbothered, unaware. She found Graham in the dining room, sipping espresso and reading something on his tablet. He looked up the moment she walked in, eyes catching the storm behind hers. "What happened?" he asked, rising slightly. "You haven't seen it?" He took one look at her face and pulled out his phone, tapped. Scrolled, froze. "Loretta, I had no idea." "Don't," she cut him off. "Don't say you had no idea when this came from someone in your circle." He opened his mouth, then closed it. There was no denying it. "Do you think I leaked this?" he asked carefully. "I think someone you trust did," she snapped. "And I think the woman you married in ink deserves to know whether you're going to do anything about it." "I need to speak to the PR team." "No," she said, voice trembling but controlled. "You need to speak for me." "Not about me, not around me, for me." "I will," he said. "But I need to know. Detroit?" Loretta stiffened. "I worked at a hotel there before Savannah. The manager was pocketing wages. When I spoke up, I was fired, blacklisted. I packed Hattie up in a borrowed car and drove south with $32 and 2 sandwiches. His face fell. "You never told me. You never asked," she said. The pause between them stretched too long. It wasn't silence anymore. It was space, and it hurt. "I'll make a statement," he said finally. "We'll control the narrative." "No," she said again, firmer now. "I'll make a statement." Graham shook his head. "Loretta, this kind of pressure. You think I haven't lived under pressure? You think this is new to me?" His jaw tensed. "Then let me help. Help me by standing behind me," she said, "not in front." He looked at her like he was losing something he hadn't even claimed yet. She turned, walking to the door, but stopped halfway. "Graham." He looked up. "You didn't protect me when it counted." He opened his mouth. She raised her hand slightly. "And before you try to explain, don't. Just think about what silence sounds like when you're on the other end of it." She walked out, leaving the faint scent of lavender and something heavier, something unspoken, in the room. By noon, she was at Porchlight, her cafe-to-be, the contractor hammering floorboards into place. She stood at the back of the space, staring out the tall windows, trying to catch her breath. Eloise showed up with lunch and fire in her eyes. "Girl," she said, setting down a brown bag. "You want me to go after whoever wrote that mess with a hot comb and a church mother's prayer list?" Loretta gave a weak smile. "Not this time. You okay?" "No." "But I'm not broken." "Then what's next?" Loretta looked around, at the worn floors, the walls half-painted. The smell of sawdust and dreams. "I opened this place," she said. "On schedule." With my head up. "And Graham?" She didn't answer, but her silence this time wasn't a void. It was a choice. That evening, Graham sat alone in the library. No music, no tablet, no distractions. He was holding the printed article, staring at the words. At the damage, at what he'd failed to prevent, he thought of her voice. "You didn't protect me when it counted, and he knew. He might have signed her name on a contract, but he hadn't earned it in the places that mattered. Not yet." The days that followed felt long and hollow. Loretta buried herself in Porchlight. Not as an escape, but as a declaration. She was there at sunrise with a thermos of strong tea, sweeping sawdust off the floor, checking every delivery, arguing with the tile guy about the shade of ivory that wasn't quite ivory enough. She didn't return to the manor. Not even to sleep. Eloise offered her guest room. Loretta accepted with a quiet nod and no explanation. Hattie called every night. "You good, Mama?" "I'm still standing, baby," she'd reply. "Some storms pass. Some you learn to build in." And she was building, but not without ache. She didn't miss the house. She missed the stillness on the porch, the quiet way Graham had started looking at her like she was more than a woman filling a space, and she missed how, when he said her name just right, it sounded like safety. But none of that changed the fact that, when she needed his voice, she'd only heard silence. On the fourth morning, she arrived at the cafe to find someone had already unlocked the front door, her stomach tensed. She stepped inside slowly. And there he was, Graham. In jeans, old sneakers, a plain white tee speckled with paint. Standing in the middle of the cafe with a bucket of brushes and a half-sanded stool. She didn't speak, neither did he. He dipped a brush in the pale blue paint, the exact shade she'd picked for the front porch swing, and turned toward the window trim. "I figured I'd start with the detail work," he said softly. Seemed like it mattered. Loretta leaned against the counter, arms folded. "How'd you get in?" "Your contractor owes me a favor." She raised an eyebrow. "You still throwing money at what you can't fix?" He looked back at her, brush mid-air. "Not this time," he said. "I came to work." She nodded once. "Then paint." And he did. For the next hour, the only sounds were bristles against wood and the occasional tap of a ladder leg settling into place. Eventually, Loretta sat on the floor, legs stretched out, sipping her tea and watching him. Really watching. "How'd you even know I'd be here this early?" she asked. "I didn't sleep." She didn't respond. Graham set the brush down and faced her. "I should have said something the moment I saw that article." "You should have done more than say something," she replied. "You should have stood next to me and made it clear that I wasn't some woman you picked off a sidewalk for convenience." I didn't know how to respond. "Then you weren't listening." Her words weren't sharp, just tired. He moved closer but didn't sit. "You're right," he said. "I thought silence would protect us. I thought strategy would fix the fallout." Loretta looked up at him. "I wasn't fallout, I was fire, and you treated me like smoke." That line landed hard. He exhaled slowly, then knelt in front of her. "You deserve better." She didn't blink. "I do. And I came to earn that. Not with apologies, but with action." She studied him for a long moment. Her silence now wasn't anger. It was measurement. Finally, she said, "You're late." "I know. But you're here." "I am. And this isn't part of the contract." He shook his head. "This is me." She looked down at the paint on his hands, the faint tremble in his shoulders, and the vulnerability he wasn't trying to hide anymore. "You built an empire off silence and power," she said. "I'm trying to rebuild something better now, off presence." Off truth. Another pause. Then, without drama or announcement, she scooted over on the floor. Graham sat beside her. Their shoulders brushed, nothing more. Loretta took a sip of her tea. Passed him the cup. He drank. And just like that, something unspoken started stitching itself back together. Not fully, not yet, but enough. Outside, the first light of morning spilled across the sidewalk, touching the edge of the porch that still waited for its swing. And inside, they sat. Two people learning how to speak the kind of language contracts couldn't write, the kind you paint with your hands, the kind you earn with your heart. The soft hum of a crowd gathered on the sidewalk outside porch light. Candles flickered in mason jars on every table. The cafe glowed with life before its doors even officially opened. Grand opening day. Loretta stood behind the front counter, running her hands over the edge of the reclaimed wood surface she'd chosen herself. Every inch of the place carried her fingerprint. From the chalkboard menu that leaned slightly left to the patch of uneven tile in the back corner she refused to replace because real life ain't symmetrical. She wore a deep olive green dress, simple, graceful. Her hair was pinned high, earrings small and gold. She looked ready, but her chest buzzed with something heavier than nerves. This wasn't just a ribbon cutting. This was a rebirth. Eloise walked over, clipboard in hand, face flushed with adrenaline. "You ready, sis?" Loretta nodded, but her eyes flicked to the front window. He hadn't shown. Graham. He'd helped paint, helped polish, even helped fix the broken doorbell last week, without saying a word. But since that morning on the floor, they hadn't spoken more than a few words. Still, some part of her, against reason, against pride, expected to see him. Hoped. Outside, the buzz swelled as local press lined up. Savannah's lifestyle columnists, business investors, even the mayor, and somewhere in that crowd, Martha Prescott. Of all people. Wrapped in a floral shawl and wide-brimmed hat, standing at the edge of the sidewalk like she owned the block. Eloise saw her too. "Well, I'll be—" Loretta didn't blink. "Let her watch." The door opened at noon sharp. Loretta stepped out to applause. She said nothing at first, just looked at the people, then up at the painted sign that hung over the doorway, Porchlight Cafe, in hand-lettered script. "I started dreaming about this place on my knees," she said, "scrubbing floors that didn't belong to me. Praying one day I'd sit at a table where I didn't have to earn my worth with silence." The crowd leaned in. "This porch isn't about coffee or biscuits," she continued. "It's about a seat. A seat for folks who never get offered one. A place where your story don't have to be polished to be respected." Applause. Cameras clicked. Some people teared up. She stepped back to cut the ribbon, and that's when she heard it. A voice, familiar, steady. "Before you cut that ribbon, I've got something to say." The crowd parted like water. Graham stood there in a dark blazer and open collar, no script in hand, no press handler in sight. Just him. Loretta's breath caught. He walked up slowly, not to the ribbon, but to her. "I built companies to stay hidden behind numbers," he said. "But then, I met a woman who walked straight into every room like the truth didn't need permission." The crowd hushed. "She didn't just help me save face. She made me face myself." Loretta's eyes didn't leave him. "I fell for you, Loretta," he said, voice soft. "Somewhere between a contract and a porch swing, I stopped pretending I could keep this practical." Whispers rippled. "And if all I'm allowed to do today is stand in front of these people and say your name like it's sacred, then I'll take that." He reached into his pocket. Pulled out a ring, not flashy, no oversized diamond. Just a thin band of white gold with a single green stone. For every time I was silent when I should have spoken, for every time I let fear outrun truth. "I'm asking, no cameras, no PR, just you and me." He stepped closer. "Let me stand beside you, not in contracts, not in appearances, but in real, ordinary days. Let me be the one who brings you tea when your hands are too tired to pour it." The crowd had gone still. Loretta said nothing for a long beat. Her jaw clenched, her eyes shined, her fingers trembled against the scissors still in her hand. Then slowly, she reached for the mic. "I don't need a savior," she said. "I built this place with dust in my lungs and stubborn in my spine. I know. I didn't wait for a man to arrive before I made space for joy. I know. But, she paused. Her voice cracked. She cleared it. I never expected a man to walk through his pride and meet me on my level. He smiled. She reached out and took the ring, not as surrender, as choice. Then let's stop performing, she said. And start living. She handed the scissors to Eloise, stepped beside Graham, and together they cut the ribbon. Cameras flashed. People cheered. But inside her, it was quiet. Finally. Peaceful, like a porch swing at dusk, with space for two. Evening settled over Porchlight with a kind of grace Loretta had only ever felt in old gospel songs, the kind that lingers behind the final note, where silence feels sacred, not empty. The cafe had closed hours ago, but she stayed behind. The chairs were flipped. The lights dimmed. A lemon pie cooled on the sill. She stood by the porch window, wiping down the counter slower than necessary, watching the street lamps flicker on one by one like stars answering a call. The door chimed softly. She didn't turn. I thought I locked that, she said without looking. You did, Graham's voice answered. I got the spare. She smiled faintly, then turned to face him. He wore a navy sweater and jeans. Simpler than usual, like he didn't want to interrupt the rhythm of the space. He held up 2 to-go cups from the cafe's own stash. I figured we both earned a cup tonight. She nodded and motioned toward the back porch. Let's go out. Light's better. They stepped through the side door and onto the wide wooden porch she'd painted herself, plank by stubborn plank. The porch swing was finely hung, white, wide. Quiet. They sat side by side, the cups warm between their hands. The swing rocked gently, like the wind remembered something it needed to say. You came back, she said softly. I was never gone, he replied, just figuring out how to show up without controlling everything. You always knew how to take up space. But lately, I'm learning how to share it. She looked over at him. That's growth. I had a good teacher. They sat for a while, just sipping, listening. The creak of the swing, the distant hum of someone mowing 2 streets over. Then he reached into his pocket. Not for another ring, just a small, folded piece of paper. He passed it to her. I started writing this before the opening, but it took a few tries to get it right. She unfolded it carefully. It wasn't a love letter. It was a list. Things I want to learn from you. 1. How to brew tea that tastes like truth. 2. How to speak without needing to be loud. 3. How to hold space instead of filling it. 4. How to forgive when you could walk away. 5. How to stay soft without being small. She read each line slowly, then again. Her hands trembled slightly. You wrote this? I lived it. Just finally found the words. Her eyes glistened, but she didn't blink them away. Graham, I'm not asking for answers. I'm just asking to keep showing up. She folded the paper, slipped it into her sweater pocket. You already are. The wind picked up. She leaned into it. Or maybe into him. She wasn't sure where one ended and the other began anymore. I've been thinking, she said after a while, about the life after all this. He turned. What do you see? I see mornings that don't start with headlines, and nights that end on porches, just like this. I see Hattie rolling her eyes at us when we slow dance in the kitchen. I see sweet tea that never runs out. He nodded slowly. I'd live in that world. You're not used to ordinary. I used to think ordinary was a failure, he said. Now, I think it might be freedom. She reached down and took his hand, not as a question, as a statement, their fingers interlaced without effort. And in that quiet, where so much had once been uncertain, something finally settled. Not everything was healed, not every wound was closed, but they were no longer avoiding the truth. They were building with it, brick by brick, cup by cup, night by night. The porch creaked beneath them, a melody all its own. And for once, the silence between them wasn't holding back anything, it was holding them. The afternoon sun draped itself across savannah like a soft goodbye, golden and slow. Porch light was quiet now. The closed for private event sign hung gently in the window. The cafe's usual hum replaced by something slower, softer, content. Inside, the tables were pushed to the walls, replaced by candles, folding chairs, and music playing low from an old speaker that Graham insisted sounded warmer than anything digital. Hattie stood behind the counter with Eloise, wearing a sage green dress and a look that said, "I'm not crying, you are." Loretta stood in the center of it all, barefoot on the hardwood floors she'd scrubbed and stained with her own hands. She wore cream linen, her hair wrapped in a silk scarf, patterned like a garden after rain. No veil, no aisle, just her. Steady. Still, Graham stepped forward from the corner, holding nothing but his hands out, open. She took them. The room hushed. No cameras, no speeches. Just them. "I had a whole thing written," Graham said, eyes never leaving hers. "But none of it sounded like us. So I'll say this." He paused. "You weren't a plan. You weren't a fix. You weren't a headline." Her hands tightened around his. "You were a mirror. One I didn't ask for, but one I needed." Loretta's eyes shimmered, but she didn't break. "I walked into this with pride and paperwork. You walked in with presence, and somehow, even when I got it wrong, you stayed long enough to help me get it right." He exhaled, a little unsteady. "I don't promise perfection. I don't even promise answers. But I promise to never go quiet when you need my voice. And to always show up, porch light or not." Loretta took a breath. Deep. Measured. Then she spoke. "I wasn't looking to be chosen," she said. "I've lived too long believing my worth didn't need an audience to be real." Her voice trembled, not from fear, but from fullness. "I didn't say yes because you changed. I said yes because you grew, and because I saw a man willing to do the work without asking for applause." A few people sniffed. Hattie dabbed at her cheek with a napkin. Loretta continued, "You don't owe me a fairy tale. You just owe me truth, and I'll take that over fantasy any day." They didn't exchange rings again, just words. And the weight of knowing this time, it wasn't arrangement or image. It was choice. It was earned. The rest of the evening passed like a secret well kept. Graham slow danced with Hattie in the corner. Martha appeared halfway through with a lemon bundt cake and a quiet nod that said more than any toast. Loretta caught her wiping her eyes when she thought no one noticed. The final song faded, and chairs scraped gently across the floor. Eloise blew out the last candle, muttering something about romance and fire hazards. Outside, the air smelled of honeysuckle and night. Graham and Loretta walked the block back to the manor slowly, hand in hand, the moon keeping pace overhead. When they reached the porch, the swing waited like always. They sat. No rush, no ceremony. Just the kind of quiet that wraps around your shoulders like a warm quilt. Graham leaned back, eyes half closed. "You remember the day I first sat here with you? You looked like you'd been hollowed out," she said. And you told me to move if I wasn't cleaning or checking in. She smiled, eyes twinkling. I remember. He turned to her, more serious now. That day, I thought I'd lost everything. You did, she said. But it made room for something real. He reached over, gently tucking a loose curl behind her ear. And you, he said. You cleaned more than my image, Loretta. You cleaned out everything I thought I had to pretend to be. She looked at him for a long moment, then leaned in, forehead touching his. You didn't buy me, she whispered. You earned me. They sat like that, swing rocking gently, world fading into the hush of stars and distant crickets. And when the breeze shifted, carrying the faint scent of tea and lemon and paint, Loretta whispered one last thing, soft as breath. Home's not a house, Graham. I know, he said. It's this. It was. And it always would be. If you enjoyed this video, comment 1 to let me know. If not, comment 2. Your thought mattered to me either way.